So, when it comes to the Terrible Tyranid collection, I need stuff to be inspired by in order to make the Tyranids look like the thing that they're inspired by. It's kind of a cyclic motion. So, here's Risk of Rain 2. I quite like Risk of Rain 2. I really like the soundtrack, which recently came out on Spotify, which means I've been listening to it, which means I'm now playing it, and I think there's a couple of really good options, as there's a fair amount of like lizard style characters in the game. Despite that though, I think I've come up with 3 that I want to do. One of them being the Beetle Queen, just because I think that's going to make for an interesting looking design. And the other one being the 2 color skins for Acrid, the playable character. So first up is making the color for the Beetle Queen's hide. I'm going to be doing this by mixing together ancient honey, orc skin and hardened leather in the right ratio to kind of make this yellowy green. Now, it did take quite a bit of tweaking because the orc skin was a lot stronger than the other 2, which meant it being green for the majority of it, and I ended up wasting a lot of paint. Now, it's still quite green, but I'm going to dry brush over with a yellow, which should make it look closer to the source material. Right now, the green isn't exactly what I wanted it to be, but I still think it's a nice looking green. It looks quite good on the model, and it should help make the Tyranids look more insecty, which is good. Now the Beetle Queen's skin is like really dark black. I'm going to change that to a brown just so we can keep some of those highlights and some of the nicer details. I'm going to do this by mixing together a cultist cloak with hardened leather and then a bit of the ancient honey. This should make for just like a lovely goopy brown. Now this guy is starting to look like he blends in with like the environment, like if he was caught in the grasslands you wouldn't be able to see him coming, which is super cool. The color scheme currently does make him look a little bit like a Minecraft block, so we'll be changing that hopefully, fingers crossed. So now the base coats are done, it's time to fix some of the colors that I'm not a big fan of, mostly being the green. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to glaze on some of this golden yellow. Now when it comes to modern hobby paints, they're really hard to glaze with because of how much pigment they have. Now they're great for base coating, they're great for dry brushing, but the positives, yeah, they can't be glazed with without a little bit of extra help. I've got there just a generic paint medium from Army Painter. I'm going to be mixing that with a tiny bit of the monument paints and then water. This should result in glazing, except for it's really hard to get the ratio right. I've been trying my best to glaze with monument hobby paints for a while with varying success, and hopefully this will go alright. Now glazing's a pretty boring process, so here's a quick cheat sheet of what I kind of want to happen. Basically you have like a very thin amount of paint on the brush, and as you add more and more pigment you get a really nice gradient going into the glazing color of your choice. After glazing, the contrast seemed to be all out of whack, so I've made like a very thin wash to go over the top. This should just sit in the recesses and barely change any of the colors that I've added. It is literally like the tiniest bit of Gravelord Grey with speed paint medium, just to kind of increase the contrast of the whole model. And because I had to do that, I'm gonna quickly dry brush over with the same golden brown, just to make sure that those colors are still as strong as they can be, because the yellow is super important. Now, one of the things you'll notice when you look at the Beetle Queen, you see how patchy it is. It's very much the art style. I'm going to try and replicate this by using these tiny little sculpting tools. They have a little ball on the end, which when dipped in paint allows you to make perfect little circles to go on your model. Now, this should add kind of like a bit of paint, pointillism? Pointillism? Yeah, pointillism. Now this particular style gives some really good results, however it doesn't stop it from being absolutely nerve-wracking out of fear that one time it'll just absolutely mess up something. Like, this is definitely a point of no return, so I'm placing each of these very deliberately. But after being super careful with that, I've decided that it was maybe a little too uniform, a little too perfect. So I'm gonna decide to go a little bit chaotic with this. I've covered my monitor with a bit of cardboard because the goal is to splatter this Monument Hobbies coal black paint just all over my model, and probably all over my desk. And yeah, sure enough, even though I should have put more cardboard down really. I was scratching little black dots off of my monitor for like weeks and weeks after this. Now, this isn't the final step for the beetle green, however, it's mostly done, and I'll be doing the other steps with the other models, so I'm gonna start working on them. Now, Acrid is like a big gummy dog. They have like a really weird texturing system in Risk of Rain, which results in these kind of abstract colors, and he looks really interesting. Now, there are two skins for him. You have the generic one along with the reward for like the original definition of completing the game. Now there's like final bosses and stuff. Originally it was just kill yourself on hard mode at a set location. But I've done that, so I have both albino and non-albino, which is cool. Now, we're gonna start by using these three colors to make that kind of gummy red. I'm gonna be using the same gummy red on both the albino and the non-albino in just different amounts. Now, I can already tell this is gonna make for a great base color, simply because I really like it right now. My goal with these guys is to kind of do it in like a painterly style. We could have gotten away with doing kind of that flicky kind of pointillism with the other one, but we can't do it with these guys due to the wide range of different colors. I'm gonna have to kind of just blend them properly, which is something I'm not very good at. This should help make things look more like the game though. I have this GSW Corn Red, which I'm going to be using to glaze the original Acrid color. This should make the highlights look this kind of bright red, and I really like this corn color. So I'm happy for that to be kind of our highlight color. Now, once again, glazing isn't particularly interesting to watch, so here, have a look at this bee instead. He's having a fun time. Now that the glazing's done, it's time to work on the highlights. I've mixed together titanium white with some fluorescent pink, and that's going to be what I'm going to be using as my highlights on these. This should give a super bright sunspot to all of the kind of shiny spots on the model. And because it's kind of this fluorescent pink kind of color, it stands out quite a bit. Sometimes I realize, not until the editing room, that yeah, I have no good footage of it, and I didn't like show it off once I had finished. So this is about as good of the footage as you're gonna get of the skin. I do show it off a little bit. There we go. Wow. Now, Acrid uses kind of a glowy poison effect, so I'm gonna have to replicate that for my Tyranids. I do this mostly by mixing a fluorescent green paint with ogre skin. This should create quite a dark and highly saturated base coat, which will then build up some glowy-like effects to make it look even better. To really make it look glowy though, I'm gonna have to dry brush it with white and then mix speed paint medium with fluorescent green to make a fluorescent green wash to put over. This is a really quick way to make something look extremely glowy with not particularly a lot of effort. Now, whilst that one dries, I'm going to start working on the albino one. Now, what I have is I have red arms, legs, but they need to turn into a gradient that heads towards the center, which is going to remain white. Now, there are many ways of doing this, but I'm going to choose wet blending. Now, wet blending didn't really work on my last wet palette, so this is kind of uncharted territory for me, and we'll see how it goes. Now, I know the principle is basically create 2 dots on your wet palette and then slowly make them meet in the middle to create a lovely gradient of paint. Now you can sample from the entire gradient as and when you want it. Now, normally this is used to make perfect gradients. Because you can sample the whole thing, you can tweak any kind of bad blending in any kind of spot, but I actually want to miss pieces out to make it look more patchy. This should make it look more like the video game, and that's my goal. Now, normally that would just be an excuse because I can't make the perfect gradient even if I wanted to, but it's true. Like the game has like this cell shaded aesthetic, and although I can't properly replicate that, this is as close as I can get it to that, so yay. To finish the albino skin tone, I'm gonna make a super thin wash of a bright red. This should help the skin look kind of translucent, as the red will only affect the recesses, making it look kind of like transparent skin. This is a big positive for albino looking things, due to the lack of melanin making the skin look transparent. Yeah. We're gonna move on to the claws for this albino one, so he can match his non-albino brother. Now, not too long ago, I found out that there's a VR mod for Risk of Rain 2, so this is it. This was basically my way of proving that in the albino form, for whatever reason, he has purple claws. The effect is still glowy green. I'm gonna choose not to have the glowy effect. I'm just gonna do the kind of like purple claws, the purple tip claws. Yeah, that should be fine, I think. It'll go better with the color scheme. That's the main excuse. The process of making the claws these glowy purple is pretty straightforward. I'm gonna quickly coat it in some dark grey, dry brush over with some titanium white, and then with some thinned down fluorescent purple, slowly glows over the claws. This should give this purple point, but I'm not showing the glazing process. So here's some more Risk of Rain 2 VR. It makes me want to throw up. Anyway, here's back to painting. In order to do kind of like the hard carapace on top, I'm gonna paint the albino one bright pink. Well, there'll be more steps to it, but this is kind of the base coat. You can also have a quick glimpse at the finished claws and the feet as well, that are currently there. And we'll work out the next steps in a second. This decision took me forever to work out, so here it is. Acrid has spines all over him, and I'm not entirely sure how to best represent this. Now, for the albino one, I'm starting to really like how it looks, so I'm going to try my best not to completely destroy it. But I'm going to try something a little bit more risky with the generic one. Generic one is the wrong word for that. He's still pretty cool. Give him a little bit of credit. I'm going to make it look more interesting by kind of just trying to create more texture. I've mixed together a couple different colors, and I'm just going to be scraping back these different lines to kind of represent those spines sticking out the back of him. As a process, I think it looks quite effective, but I'm not really sure what other use cases you could use it for. I think it looks pretty good on this model in particular, but I don't know where else you would want to do something like that. Now, in order to make it look a little bit more like a carapace, I'm going to add some white edge highlighting. This should just make it stand out a little bit more. And that's these guys done. Now, you can find 3 different looking models. I really like the colors of each of these. I could see an army of at least 2 of the 3 of these. I'm not sure. I'm not sure the pink one really does it justice. I'm really a fan of like the purple claws, but nah, yeah. Maybe I could have gone with like the scales being different. I'm not sure. But yeah, as a trio, they're a little bit weird. Individually, they're really cool though. The Beetle Queen design, I really like. I think if you had like a full army of these guys, I think it would look really nice. The splatter effect really does kind of like set it apart as like something interesting, because like just like a greeny yellow and a black body is not really anything special, but having that kind of like splatter pattern and all of those like little yellow dots over everything, it just makes it look more interesting. Like if you saw that, you would like pick it up and be like, this is cool. And I like that because of that. The eyes, I didn't show me doing the eyes because it was an absolute mess. I think I'll just leave it as they could have been better. They've bled out a little bit, so they're much bigger than they should be. But yeah, no, I really like these guys. And then we have the Acrid inspired design. I'm really happy with the glowy effect. I really like it. I like how much it kind of bleeds in with that pinky purple. Kind of adds to that kind of like, he's supposed to be all like gooey. Adds to kind of like that skin like kind of subsurface scattering, I guess. I think that maybe this one out of all of the Tyranids I've done could have benefited from like a painted base. I think if I had also painted that kind of like that toxic green, it would have looked a lot like he was kind of like stood in a puddle of his own toxic goo, which would have been a really good idea. But I'm gonna stick with kind of like the matte black base for now. Maybe I'll go back to it. And then you have the albino one. Now the albino one probably could have done with a bit more tweaking. I think when it comes to the skin tone, I think it could have done with more white in there. It's very pink at the moment. I think that would have just benefited. If I had known that I was going to do like pink scales, pink armory stuff, I would have changed what I've done. I probably, yeah, should have done that. But I'm pretty happy with how this kind of looks. I think if you were to have like a pink Tyranid army, this would look alright. For the benefit of contrast, I probably should have done the armory stuff like a darker, different looking color. But I quite like the color that it currently is, so I don't really want to change it. The claws and the things, pretty good. I really like kind of like the bright purple blending from the dark grey. I think that's going to be something that I'm going to want to try and replicate with other things, just because I quite like it actually. And that's the video. This one's ended up being quite dense. I ended up using like quite a lot of different processes for all of these. Well, these 3 models. I had a lot of footage to kind of scrub through. This one's taken me like twice as long to edit as all of the others, just because I did a lot more with these guys than I've done with any of the other Terrible Tyrannid collection. So I'm not sure what this means for the future of the Terrible Tyrannid collection. It might get more complicated as time goes on. I'm gonna try not to though. But yeah, if you've enjoyed this video, please subscribe. Stick around if you want to see more. And yeah, thank you for watching.